there are some fabulous stories in this particular book. From Adolf Hitler to Gutenberg.
Who doesn't like Adolf Hitler stories? They're great. Sure, your firm should be without a good Hitler story.
Exactly. It's a staple of every good comedy festival too.
Exactly. Well,
which would be your favorite? I mean, which is the one that you think is?
There's a lot of them. I think there's a story about how zero arrived in Europe from India, and how the arrival of zero revolutionized mathematics, and how the revolution in mathematics allowed accountancy to become an essential tool of the merchant class in the Renaissance, and how the merchant class in effect elbowed out the kings and the warriors, and the merchants became more cosmopolitan. There's a reason we have this expression, the Renaissance man. They were comfortable reading books and in literature and in commerce and whatever. And I came across this story, again, I think it was during the pandemic, of the role of Sicily, the extraordinary island in Italy, in the acquisition of this piece of technology called zero. And the reason it was a piece of technology was it allowed people to do what our generation could do, which was mental arithmetic, but my kids have lost. We've spent 400 years trying to get kids to do mental arithmetic. We lost in about 4 years, right? But that's, I blame Google for that. But the story is about how the Arabs conquered Persia and brought home, as most people who conquer any area, the best they found. One of the things they found was this magical thing called zero, that the Hindu Indians were using and the Europeans had rejected. And the reason the Europeans had rejected it, because zero is the void, it is nothing, the nothingness. And that freaked out Europeans who were educated in the Greek idea that we had to prove everything. And nothing freaked out Europeans, so they ignored it for over 1,000 years. The Arabs, on the other hand, acquired it from the Persians, refined it, and used it for commerce. So for fractions, for algebra, for ratios, all these things that are essential for commerce now. And they brought it to the island of Sicily, where they ran a caliphate or a sub-caliphate for about 200 years, until a bunch of Northern European head kickers called the Normans arrived. And the Normans, you see, Normans arrived in Ireland as well around the same time. They arrived in Ireland at about 1139. They arrived in Sicily about 1169. And they, at a time of the Crusades, which is really amazing, they said, we will not kill our Muslim neighbors. We will not kill our Jewish neighbors. We will not kill anyone who's infidel. In fact, we will create a vibrant, tolerant, multicultural, multiracial, multilinguistic society, and we will allow commerce be the arbiter, standing side by side with God or Allah or whoever it was. And that in itself was amazing, that happened so long ago. And there, a gentleman, a young man called Leonardo, where was this thing?
Oh, DiCaprio. He's a famous actor.
Yeah, it's not DiCaprio. He's the one with the weakness for young ladies. Yeah, that was one of the best jokes of the thing. That DiCaprio, the speech was so long that
exactly.
DiCaprio had lost his girlfriend by the time we were over.
He was too old for him.
Yeah, he's too old for him. No, he was called Leonardo of, not Pisa, but he became known to the world as Fibonacci, who wrote about mathematics, Fibonacci sequence. So the reason that story interests me is it shows how ideas jump from one culture to another and can change the way you think, and as a result of this can change the world. So that because I was always interested, what interests me about history is why things happened, when they happened, and where they happened, like what was going on. So what was going on in Italy in the time of Dante, to allow Dante write so beautifully about everything in society and set up the scene for the subsequent extraordinary flourishing of the city of Florence. And what you see is this little creature, Zero, is part of the story. So those sort of stories interest me. The Hitler story is always good. Every book that, I was, Brian Cox, the English physicist, right, who wrote a lovely tribute in the book, or a blurb. He rang me up and he says, "Oh, you've done it there, mate. It's really brilliant, isn't it?" I said, "Well, because you've stalled with Hitler." He said, "You've got to stall with Hitler." Anyway, so, but the Hitler story is fascinating. That Adolf Hitler, personally, in 1943, orchestrated the largest counterfeit the world has ever seen of £5 sterling notes, and the idea was that they would be dropped over England in 1943, 1944, to create hyperinflation, which Hitler had experienced in Germany and saw how hyperinflation destroyed not the German economy, but the German mind. It destroyed it. It made people hyper anxious. It totally undermined the class system, all that sort of stuff. And he thought, if we can't beat the Brits with bombs, which they couldn't by that stage, we'll beat them with money. And the story then unearthed a whole host of other fascinating characters who were Jewish artisans, bankers, scientists, mathematicians, printers, artists, fine artists, who were assembled from concentration camps all around Europe into Sachsenhausen to explicitly break the Bank of England. And this story really fascinated me. The story ends by the time the forgers actually had got the £5 notes they wanted, and they had convinced themselves, because they'd sent a German industrialist to Switzerland to go possibly to UBS, where I worked, to say, are these banknotes real? And the Swiss said, after they got out their lights and their magnifying glasses, and they said, yes, they are real. Because the industrialist says, oh, yeah, we got them on the black market, we're not that sure. And then the German industrialist, who was obviously a Nazi, said, look, I know that you guys are absolutely credible, but I'd love if you were to send these notes to the Bank of England just to make sure the serial numbers are right. And the Swiss sent the notes to the Bank of England, and the Bank of England came back a few weeks later and said, yes, we printed these. And they'd all been printed in a concentration camp. So that shows the quality of the forgery. And then by the time they had the green light to go, the Germans were losing the war in Russia, and they didn't have the squadrons to drop the money. But that's at the end. Then the SS said, okay, well, we've buckets of money that the Bank of England thinks is their money. And so all the art that they bought, all the visas they bought from the Vatican, right, were bought with this money, because the Vatican didn't give those visas for nothing, right? And at the end of the day, Mussolini, who was kidnapped by Italian liberation forces, was released. Or he wasn't released. He was sprung out of jail by German paratroopers who had been paid, who had paid an informant money which had been printed in the concentration camps. And those sort of stories tell you how brilliantly significant money has been in our society. But more than that, they tell you what money is really about. It is about a gelling agent, an essential foundational gelling agent of our societies.